Podcast. Chris Anthony with you here. So glad you're with me today on the live stream. We're going to look at a subject that keeps coming up over and over again. It's something that you hear quite frequently on the discussions of helping people out, helping them get back on track when someone's going through a trauma. So again, this is Streams of Light podcast, and I'm Chris Anthony. And today we're going to look at some practical ways that we can do grounding, that we can ground ourselves. So I'm excited about that because this is something that has been part of my life for quite a few years. And, the question becomes, how do you ground? And what is grounding? Is it really real? I mean, it sounds like kind of like New Age speak, this earthing, this grounding. And I wanted to mention that there is a difference between the actual physical grounding, the scientific fact of grounding versus spiritual grounding. And we might call the physical grounding earthing. And this is a real scientific thing. The earth sends forth resonance, something called Schumann resonance. And there are magnetic waves that come from the earth's core. As well, the soil and every living thing gives off electrons, living energy. So as we've gone along in society, we have detached ourselves from the earth. You and I are essentially earthen vessels. We are an extension of earth. That is something that is very important to consider when you consider whether or not you might need more grounding. You are the same elements as the earth. I am as well. So it's very important to be connected to the earth. And what's happened really since the Industrial Revolution and since we've had all these advancements in science is we have slowly and surely detached ourselves from the earth. I mean, if you think about the shoes that you wear with rubber soles on them, that provides an insulation. Sure, granted, you can walk through rain puddles without getting your little toesies wet, but the truth is, it insulates you from all that goodness that is coming from the earth into your body, which as an extension of the earth, quite frankly, you need. The earth has its elements. The universe has its elements. Fire, sky, water, air. These are all things that we need. If you were to cut off air supply for, let's say, 3 to 7 minutes, you'd be a goner. So we'd never think that we wouldn't breathe the air. And that sunlight, so important, that fire, and this is one of the reasons why I enjoy doing yoga on a regular basis, to generate that inward fire, just like the fire in the sky, the sun that hangs right there on the sky, shining into our beautiful earth, giving life to plants and to us really, so we can ignite that fire in the solar plexus region through exercise, through movement. We need these things. Fire, earth, the air, water. Water is a great conductor. We need water. And when you're around places like the ocean, there are plenty of negative ions coming out of the ocean, which is so good for your body. So we need these things, and particularly more since we become so detached from the earth, driving around, sitting on our car seat as we drive down the road with rubber tires insulating us from everything that is. So what we find is when we get back to earth, if you've ever had that experience where perhaps you were at the beach or by the lake all day, and let's say you were just laying in the sand, and if you were there significantly, a significant amount of time for hours and hours, you might realize that night, boy, I feel so good. Not quite sure what it is. I went camping out in Joshua Tree a couple of months ago for a yoga retreat, and I felt so good after sleeping on the ground for a couple of days. I thought, when I get home, I'm going to sleep on the ground. Of course, it never happened, right? I promised myself I would, but I felt so good. And as we get older, we have ailments in our body that tend, as a body wears thin, the ailments tend to creep up on us as things aren't as young and elastic and resilient as they were when we were at a younger age. The body begins to wane, and we find that even if we spend just a little bit of time grounding, spending that time outdoors, getting sunshine, getting air, being on the earth, having our feet in the grass, in the living biosphere of earth, that we feel so much better. And that will affect, many times, scientists have done studies where just touching the ground for a certain amount of time will actually reduce pain. We know that it reduces inflammation in the body. And then there's those things that have built up over time in our body that aren't going to necessarily heal with a snap of a finger, but those are the things that will begin to dial down once we begin to practice earthing and grounding on a regular basis. So there is a difference between the physical reality of grounding and earthing and the spiritual side of it as well. So it's a fact. I love the fact that the scientists of the day are so much more open. When I was younger, it was like the scientists of the day were really like in their own religion. Many of them were atheists, and many of them were anti-spiritual. And so if you came along and said, hey, getting back to nature and grounding, it's so good for you, because they had sort of an anti-spiritual perspective, everything was written off. But now we have a whole new breed of people that are studying science, and they have so much more tools at their disposal. And really, because of our detachment from nature, we're so much more desperate to have the answers, desperate to get better, desperate to get back to earth, desperate to get healthy and whole and calm our minds. So it's become so important. I want to say, first of all, one of the most practical things that you can start doing even today, it's a little bit tougher in winter, of course, especially if you live in a cold area, is walking on the ground barefoot. That is a very practical tip for grounding, for earthing, is walking on the ground with just your bare feet. Take off those rubber soles, those rubber shoes, sandals, get those things off you and try and get your feet on terra firma. You might say, well, I live in a concrete jungle. For the most part, even the concrete is healthier than walking on rubber soles. The reason being is concrete is just crushed rock for the most part, and water. And so outside of the fact that there's a lot of petroleum products in a lot of the streets and such, for the most part, even walking on the concrete would be by far better than walking with your shoes on. So walking barefoot. And of course, getting that sunshine. We know we need sunshine for vitamin D, but the sunshine is the source of all life on the earth as far as we look at physical life. Nothing could live without the sun for the most part. I suppose there's certain kinds of algae or whatever that could live, or moss or whatever. But for the most part, the sun is the source of life and the sustainer of life. So it's so important to get that sunshine. That's why I like to do maybe a yoga practice outdoors. I do that quite a bit throughout the week, and I do it barefoot. And of course, we're on rubber mats for the most part. So it does feel good when you're doing Shavasana to maybe scoot off your mat, get on a blanket, or get right on the grass and get your whole body on the earth. So, barefoot walking, getting that sunshine, and then eating foods that come from the ground. Doesn't it make sense if you want to get back to earth and get grounded, that eating foods that come from the ground would make a lot of sense. These are foods that are rich in the cosmic energy that comes from the sun, the solar energy. And so these are also what we would call foods rich in prana. And prana is so important because the prana is where the life force comes from. And I remember one yogi called it lifetrons. I like that. We have electrons, we have protons, we have neutrons, and then we have lifetrons. And that's the prana energy that is in the ether, that is in the air. So it's so important to eat foods that are rich in prana. And so I just love the idea of getting back to earth, back to grounding. This is something that when people are going through a very difficult time, one of the first things that you will hear is you need to practice something to ground you. And usually that is said to people when they're in a state of disarray, right? When they are in a state of either panic or loss or suffering or misery, people will say to them, really need to get grounded. You need to do some grounding. And this, of course, is the hardest thing to do at that point. So even though it's hard, this is the best thing that we could do for our souls when we're going through a difficult time, is get back to earth. Just get outside, spend time outside, spend time on the ground. You know, I once heard a teacher say that if you can get your hands in the soil for at least 10 minutes, 30, an hour a day, does wonders for the body, wonders for the mind. They're now even discovering that there's sort of a living culture in the soil that is very akin to something like penicillin. So in other words, getting your hand in the ground is actually healthy for the body in more ways than one, that it could actually provide you a buffer. We know that it helps with inflammation, that it reduces inflammation just to do grounding and to be in contact with the earth. We're now discovering that it can actually help boost your immune system by the qualities that are in the soil. So these are really good things. And I'd like to bring in a good friend of mine, Sarah Leist from Quora. She's a writer on Quora, and she's been with me on the podcast before in the live stream. So Sarah, are you there? Hello, Sarah, are you there?
Can you?
I could hear you for just a split second.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Are you with me?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but you sound, I'll tell you what, it sounds like you are in a weak signal area. I'm not sure if it's because you're connected to your Wi-Fi and you're outside, but I'll give you a couple minutes to see if you can get your signal strength up, and we'll come back to you, because I was getting about 1 word out of 3, and that was definitely not enough. So spiritual grounding is kind of where we're going on this, because one of the ways to be spiritually grounded is to start with the earthing, the physical grounding that is so important for our being, for our body, for our mind. And so the physical grounding is, in my mind, a prerequisite, and it's actually a building block of spiritual grounding. So spiritual grounding is a way to further the natural elements of the earth and grounding this earthen vessel in the substance of terra firma. See, we say terra firma, that's the name, I think that's the Latin name for earth, right? Firm. When you say someone's really grounded, what are you saying? They're solid, man. Oh yeah, I like that guy. He's solid, so solid. You just see something about a person who's heavily grounded. And I guarantee you, even if there's some sort of spiritual seeker and they've got a lot of spiritual things going on, most people who are really solid, it'd be very unusual to see someone who's really solid, terra firma, of the earth. It'd be really unusual to see someone who's super solid, who's not first rooted in those physical grounding, earthing things that I was just speaking of. But then we take it to the next level, because again, the physical part is a building block of what I feel like is the most important part. So the first part is a necessity. That's a no-brainer. But the most important part is what you do with your own free will, what you do with your own intention, with your own time. And this is where I think we can really excel, because anyone could be grounded from being outside, but they can still be riddled by their own mind, their own fears, and their own worries. So it's very, very important to not take for granted that second element of spiritual grounding. So, first of all, you should have some sort of practice. Practice is important, and I love the word practice because in the West, particularly, we're so performance-oriented that we just want things right away. The other day, I was trying to organize a gathering, and I wanted to get some information from a friend who's part of the gathering and see if he could pitch in and do something. And it's funny, I realized I'm just like every other Westerner, every other American. I wanted to find out. He was busy at work. He saw my missed calls. He saw my text, but he couldn't answer because he was in a meeting. But I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted it now because, we have all this technology, right? We have cell phones, we have, FaceTime, we have live streams, we have so much. But really, the word practice goes back to something that is evolving, something that is progressing, certainly progressing, but you don't look at it so much like the destination. You look at it like a journey. And so the spiritual grounding is, first of all, a practice. And a practice is what? It's a journey. It doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't even really matter so much where you finish. And I know that may come across as a surprise because so much of Western spirituality in particular talks about the finish line. So much so that sometimes they ignore the present and don't live in the present. They're so focused on the future. But it's not so much where you're at when you start, and it's not so much even where you're at when you finish. It's all about living moment by moment, in the moment, every day, and having some sort of forward motion. And so forward motion comes from intention and work. This is reality. And as you move forward, there is a progress. And that's all that life is about. If you look outside, the plants outside that are giving you life and taking the carbon dioxide from your lungs and exchanging it for beautiful oxygen, those guys are always progressing forward. And you may even say, well, they're dying. Well, we do the same. So we all are in this progression of life. So the practice is very important. And it's very practical. The practice is practical in that there's things you can do, such as, for example, meditation, that will make you extremely grounded. How would meditation make someone more grounded? First of all, you begin to observe yourself in meditation, and you observe the breath. And what ends up happening is that you begin to watch the mind, to watch the body, to watch the emotions. There's a higher part of you that you discover in meditation that becomes an anchor in your life. Once you firmly establish the view from above, so above, so on earth, it begins to translate into the earthen vessel. Once you begin to see your breath, to see your thoughts, to see your emotions and watch them, be a watcher, you begin to realize that there's a part of you, to quote Martin Laird, who's the one that's observing? That's the big question. Who is the one that is observing? The one which is watching is what spiritual seekers would call the higher self. Perhaps they would call it the Atman. Perhaps they would call it the image of the divine within you, or the soul, the Purusha, as Vivekananda would always say. So that part of you that is the higher part of you begins to emerge as, in a hierarchical sense, as king soul, so to speak, that rules the kingdom of the body, the mind, the will, the emotions. Once you firmly establish the differentiation between it, even if you're not super spiritual or victorious in the beginning, in the things that you want to be, you've had a great breakthrough once you make the distinction between those things. I started noticing things about myself and my own relationships. I found that if I had a past situation that I would have reacted to, thinking that, oh, this is how I feel, and I would just go into it and I would react. And most of the times when I look back, if I was honest with myself, I found that those were patterns that were primarily negative, that led to negative results. So when I began to observe myself in meditation, I had a huge breakthrough. I realized that my thoughts and my emotions, that these things were just functions of another part of myself that was lower. And in the future, when certain things were said that in the past would have just simply triggered me and I would not have even seen it, I would have thought I was my own emotions. At that point, when I was living in my emotions, I was living in a very real way, in a not so good place, in a tormentful place. But once I began to observe my breath, observe my mind and my thoughts and my emotions, then I had the most interesting thing happen. Someone would say something, and then I'd see that little emotional trigger, and I would just simply observe it. Because when you meditate, you develop a skill. You develop a skill of observing yourself and holding, not judging it, not criticizing it, not worrying about it, but just simply holding. You're in a holding pattern. Let's see if we can get Sarah back in. Sarah, are you with me?
Hey, Chris, can you hear me now?
I can hear you so much better. So what do you think? I don't know if you were able to listen to what I was just saying. What do you think about the holding pattern?
The holding pattern, it's really interesting because I do meditation practice as well. So I also notice some of the triggers, but I've never actually tried just holding space for it. I imagine that, giving yourself the space to feel it and to recognize your triggers, and then maybe going back and finding out later why you were triggered, and kind of meditating on that is beneficial. But just holding the space for it and being able to ground yourself in that moment.
Right. I think that's huge. And yeah, the shadow work is great. And I think for me, that's sort of come naturally. The more I meditate, the more I've realized that I didn't have to be certain ways, that wasn't necessarily me. And then the shadows have just sort of, I guess the shadow work was more like light coming in to those areas where I've discovered, oh, that goes back to something that happened to me when I was a kid. And obviously I'm still sensitive about that, or I'm still dealing with that. But the cool thing is now you know it, and that's like 80% of the battle, right? I mean, just recognizing it is a huge breakthrough, because before we didn't really realize that we were living out those hurts and those challenges from earlier days or previous experiences, and now we can just see it. And I think going back to the holding pattern, what I liked about that was I felt like the holding pattern for me was something that I really learned it while I was practicing this technique called Shambhavi Mudra, which is when you gaze upward towards, your third eye. And when you do that, it takes a certain amount of concentration. And of course, you get flooded with thoughts and you get restless in your mind, your body, everything sort of squirms at some point. And what I realized was, once I learned how to hold that this technique was like breakthrough, revolutionary, not in so many respects of my life, not just the triggers, but just, it helped me sleep better. So
Absolutely. I imagine it really helps you, hold on to that moment when you're triggered, and, being able to, like you said, ground yourself in that moment rather than reacting.
yes, yeah, for sure. So meditation definitely is something that I think helps people become more spiritually grounded. And then I don't know if you have a chance, Sarah, to practice much yoga, but I always felt like yoga for me was huge in that if we go back to some of those prior emotional events in our life, traumas, etc., I found that yoga for me was a way where I could take my demons to the mat, so to speak, my personal demons, and I could wrestle with and kind of smooth out and work out some of the kinks in my body, because I feel like the body stores emotions like maybe even more than we're aware of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your body speaks. It says everything that your soul needs to say.
Right.
And it says it through pain. It says it through tightness. It says it through anxiety and depression and all of the emotions that you go through. And yoga helps you balance that. It helps you work it out in a physical form. And it also helps you ground yourself and just get out all of the energy. It gives you a way to transform that energy into something positive.
I love that, because one of the things that people are talking about a lot right now is that energy was never, that energy can't go away, that maybe it was never really created, and that it won't disappear, but it will transform. Like if a wave comes in from the ocean, it's a wave of energy that has moved thousands of miles through the water, but the energy doesn't ever really disappear. It just turns into
back to the ocean.
What's that? What's that?
I said it goes back to the ocean.
Well, yeah, it goes back to the ocean, or sometimes like friction, like when the waves break against the shore. There's friction, there's heat, and so
Right.
But I love that how you mentioned, what was the phrase you used? Was it transform?
It transforms it. Yeah, I think some people call it transmutation.
Yeah.
So it transforms the energy, all of the negative energy that's in your body, whether it's, emotions or just the tightness in your body, because your body carries all of your emotions. It carries all of the pain inside of you, and it comes out in physical forms. And when you practice yoga, not only is it good for your mental health, but it's also good for your physical health, and it transmutes all of that energy into something positive.
I love that because, it seems like, when you say that, it makes me think, man, we're divine creatures to be able to take something like that and transform it. It's just, to me, that's mind boggling to think that we can take something that potentially could lead to disease or kill us and we can turn it into something positive to help and bless people. And it's just amazing to me to think that. I just love that. I had a friend who just said to me today, we were talking about this podcast on the phone, and she said that one of the things that she learned about, just this whole subject of grounding, releasing, and things like that was releasing the things that didn't serve her. And I just, I really, I thought about that, and I felt like that was a really, really powerful thing to say, to release those things that don't serve you, to actually go in and do a little bit of that introspection and then say, what are the things that are not serving me anymore? Maybe I'm mad at, a family member or one of my former bosses, or, someone I was married to or dated or whatever it may be for you. And to actually realize, wow, this is like energy. Like I'm actually burning energy, even subconsciously. You're doing it when you wake up in the middle of the night and you have thoughts on your mind. Yeah, you have thoughts on your mind in the middle of the night, and you know that, oh my gosh, you're just burning energy on these other things that don't serve you.
Or you're dreaming about it.
Yeah,
when you could be dreaming of much better things.
Yeah, totally. So letting go of those things that don't serve you is huge. And this will, again, anchor us. So before I was talking about the physical grounding things, and then kind of migrated here to the spiritual side of how to be spiritually grounded. So we've looked at meditation. We've mentioned briefly yoga. And I think, by the way, I heard a real famous teacher talking about what yoga does for you when you do it every day. He said, when you work out the kinks in your body, it makes you soft and it makes you pliable. And he said, and flexible. He goes, there may be disarray all around you and you may have trouble ahead of you in the day, but he goes, the main objective is when you start out today to get this body, like get all the kinks out and get it soft and get it pliable and get it at rest, at peace. So in other words, you're an extension of the earth. You are an earthen vessel. You're grounded and you're just pliable and you're soft. And that seems like another important thing to mention to those who are looking at, gosh, I keep coming back to this thing about being grounded. How do I do it? I think it's really good to practice meditation and yoga as far as a spiritual technique. And there's really other good ones too, like Tai Chi, and there's other martial arts and things like that people practice. There's, prayer and, worship and bhakti and all these, these things that just uplift the soul. Am I missing anything, Sarah? Can you think of any other spiritual practice that would be very grounding, that would center someone?
Well, me personally, I come from Native American ancestry, so my personal form of grounding, my favorite, is to just go out in nature, go for walks, and go, connect with the earth on a spiritual level, through nature.
Yes.
So one of my favorite things to do, when I was younger, when I used to live in California near you, Chris.
You live near me?
I did, yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
I used
or maybe
to
you
live
told
just
me.
north of LA.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, did you live in Ventura or where'd you live?
Yeah, it was near Ventura. I lived in Thousand Oaks.
Oh, Thousand Oaks. Oh, that's good. Yeah,
yeah, that area.
Yeah, all the rolling hill. That's when LA really gets nice. Is like when you get like
Get out of the smog.
Yeah. But then those rolling hills right before you drop into Camarillo, like that's beautiful land
Yes.
up there. Yeah. So,
Yes,
okay.
it's gorgeous out there. Yep. So I used to live out there, and I used to go for these long walks. I go down to Zuma Beach in Malibu whenever I felt like I really needed to connect with God and just connect with myself. I would go down to Zuma Beach, and I'd just park on Pacific Coast Highway there, and I would go for walks along the beach barefoot through the waves, right at the shoreline through the tidal zone, and I would just go and walk for miles. And it was just so cathartic and spiritually um, grounding, for me to do that all the time. And here I go for walks in the woods. I go hiking a lot. That's kind of how I meditate in a physical form other than yoga. And, right now I'm sitting in my backyard. I have a fire going.
Oh, you
That's also
figured
how I ground myself.
you figured it out then. You figured out the connection, the Wi-Fi or whatever it was.
Yes, I did.
That's good. I like that.
Yep. So I'm sitting in the backyard right now, tending to my fire. So a lot of times when I have a lot on my mind, especially, I like to come make a fire and just sit around it and stare at the fire and kind of meditate and just think about all the things that I need to let go of.
Yeah. I love that because I feel like we've lost that. I kind of started to rediscover. It's funny we say, use that rediscover because it may be the first time in my life, but I feel like, I'm kind of leaning towards multiple lives as more of a reality than just a solitary life once and for all. But I feel like I'm rediscovering what you were talking about with getting back to nature and walking through nature. I feel like, I don't know if you've had, I'm sure you have since you've done these nature walks and you have that heritage of, the American Native heritage. I just feel like there's these times when you just realize that not just that this tree is alive or that this plant or there's this little squirrel that's alive, but have you ever had one of those transcendent experiences where you're walking in the earth and it's almost like everything working in unison. It's almost like you have this sense of Gaia, like the earth as a living entity in its totality.
Mm-hmm.
So powerful.
It's almost like it's all from one divine source.
Right. And the Celts, I know that the American natives knew it. I was reading some Celtic literature and I was like blown.
I'm also Celtic.
I was just, what's that?
I said, I'm also Celtic.
Oh, you are. Yeah. That is to me, that like reading some of that literature and how they saw the divine in everything that was alive on the earth is just, it just blows my mind. And I think, wow, the reason why that's not so as prevalent as it should be or could be is because we have, again, in our advancement, human advancement with, the Industrial Revolution and everything that's happened with urbanization and all that is we've kind of lost, we've lost that, we're all, there's we've lost that connection. So many people, and it's okay. I mean, people are working in high rises and they're doing good things and they're good people. I'm not saying it's all gone to hell or anything. I'm just saying that I think the next movement we're going to have is going to be more back to nature and rediscovering Gaia as a living entity.
Absolutely.
And just resonating in the resonance of Earth. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that one. I think that has been a long time coming, and I think people would find a lot of solace and a lot of peace within themselves, once they realize that they can connect to the divine through everything around them.
Right.
It's not just, it's not just in church. It's not just through, certain practices.
Right.
It's all around you. Heaven is all around you, and you can connect with it anytime you want. It's all around you.
I love that. I think I remember one moment in my spiritual kind of seekings and spiritual moments where I looked out my window and I saw this tree and it was kind of blowing in the wind and the leaves were just kind of moving in this hypnotic sort of movement. And I don't know how else to describe it, Sarah. It was like It was like I was looking at divinity itself, like dancing in the wind. It just for a moment. I can't even explain it. Words could never describe it, but it's like I saw the divine in that moment. And I know I have friends who would say, "Oh, you're saying that that tree is God." It's not even that really. It's more like,
Yes,
you know what I'm
actually.
talking. You know what I'm talking about. It's so beyond human explanation. But when you have those moments, like you said, it's like, wow, heaven, it's everywhere. It's not,
Mhm.
it's not a place. It's like, it's just right here, right now, wherever, wherever I'm at. Thank God for that. Right. And
Absolutely.
we don't have to keep looking everywhere for it.
Exactly. I remember when I had my spiritual awakening last year, the wind rustling through the trees in my backyard was, one of this pivotal moment for me, when I was contemplating, the universe basically, and how the universe transcends all living things here on Earth and other planets and all throughout, the entire universe. It transcends all of it. The divine does, and I asked this question of the universe. I asked a question that was really, really pivotal to my spiritual journey, and I felt like the divine answered me through the wind,
Wow.
as like you said, the rustling of the leaves, that they're all dancing. It gives you that answer, that gust of wind that gives you, the answer you were looking for.
You may be too young for this book, Sarah, because I know this book came out a long time ago. It came out in the late '80s, but it was called The Celestine Prophecy. Did you ever read that?
I've heard of it. I
Yeah,
think.
it's a
um,
it's a pretty cool book. I think the author I think it was James Redfield or something like that. This book was amazing. It was about these like scrolls that were found in Peru, and all these people were on a treasure hunt really to find, they were called the insights, and each insight would build one upon another. And the first insight was what we're talking about now, that there's this master synchronicity working in all things, through nature, through everything, through people and everything. And that was the first insight. And that every other thing that came after that sort of, it's like math. I don't know if you remember, like, a math teacher standing up there saying, now everything is, you have to learn this, because if you don't learn this, you're not going to understand, you can't build upon a faulty foundation. And so it was kind of like math in that sense that, you couldn't really go on to the next insight until you realized that there was this master synchronicity working. And I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about with nature and divinity working through nature. And also even the grounding part of it. I saw a guy who talked about, he said, have you ever tried hugging a tree? And I thought, I can't say that I have, but I've leaned up against them. Have you? I mean, if you lean up against a tree and just kind of read a book, take a nap, just kick back, you check out the squirrels, do whatever you're going to do. Wow. If you want to feel grounded, lean up against a freaking tree. I mean, I hope there's some people listening to this that go out and just right after they finish this, go out and lean up against a tree or maybe hug a tree. Talking about feeling grounding. That is powerful.
Well, there's a reason why Buddha and Jesus did that.
That's right. See, Buddha was under what was it, like terebinth tree? I can't remember what that was.
The Bodhi tree.
The Bodhi tree. Thank you.
Yep.
And then what about Jesus? What tree was that?
I think it was in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Oh, right. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he was, he was, I can't think of it right now, but yeah. Well, there's a lot of tree symbology. There was fig trees, there was all kinds of trees, and yeah, the tree, and, the tree is an interesting thing.
I wonder why.
Yeah, the tree is an interesting thing too, because I wonder why. The root system on the trees look very similar to what? To I think it's like at the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing the patterns we see, and then I think the branching system looks very similar to, I believe, maybe the brain. It's just fascinating how
the cardiovascular system
or something like that. Yeah. It's just amazing. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at what is it, the walnut? Have you ever cracked a walnut and just looked at it? It's just like a brain. It's got two hemispheres, and it's got the texture on it. And then of course the news came out where You know what's really good for your brain? Walnuts. Who would have figured? So many good things like that. So walking through nature. For me, I like surfing. That's one of my favorite outdoor things, and I'll tell you why. And I'm going to give people I'm going to give some practical advice here. I know some people are landlocked and they can't get in the water, but I have some practical things coming up that have to do with my surfing experience. One of the things I realized with surfing was that on bigger days, when I was out surfing on bigger swell days, oftentimes I would feel so good afterwards. Now, some people would think, well, you feel good because you got back to land and you didn't, drown. But it was more than that. It was like
endorphins.
It's endorphins. But you know what I noticed is the ocean, we know that the ocean has tons of negative ions in it. And that's what makes people feel good. That's what makes you feel good. I have a crystal map where you heat the crystals. The crystals heat up, create the far infrared heat. It releases negative ions. This is what makes you feel good. So if there's people out there that are thinking, what other things can I do to ground? What other things can I do to get my sanity back, to get out of this depression, to get back to feeling better? Eating right, exercising, getting outside, getting in the ocean, getting in the water, getting negative ions. If you're landlocked and you have some money and you can't get the negative ions from the ocean, or you can't spend your time on the ground sleeping outside because it's -20 outside, then think about getting one of those mats, a crystal mat, a biomat, a healthy line mat. All those different companies sell these mats, and a lot of them have other technologies built into it. I personally sleep on my mat. And even though I don't believe in sleeping on a heated mat all night long because it dehydrates you, I put a little heat in the winter when I get in, and then I have a timer turn it off. And I don't know if people realize it, but if you sleep on a mat like that, not only are the crystals, it's like sleeping on the ground when you're sleeping on rocks, right? You're sleeping on crystals, which is like rocks. And then if it's plugged into a wall, what you have is a ground, because the cable has a grounding plug, and the grounding plug is plugged into an outlet. And the outlet is what? The outlet is grounded by what? It's going into the ground. So there are actually, even if you don't have enough money to afford a crystal mat, like the one I have, you could actually just buy a grounding sheet or a grounding comforter. Those are online. You can Google that. Healthy Line, the company I got my mat from, they sell them. And so they have actually grounding sleep devices that you literally plug in. And it really does. I have friends that use those. I mean, I use my mat, but I have friends that use those. That works too. But I love more than anything just being outside surfing, because I always feel like if I can get it in the most natural way, that's the way to go. So for me, surfing waves of energy that are rolling through the water, there's something about riding a wave of energy that's pushing the water, and it's just, there's something exhilarating about that. You're riding,
absolutely.
You're riding the energy, you're working with it. I know a lot of guys like to bust airs and shred and rip, and that's cool too. You're ripping apart, you're tearing the energy. But I've learned as I gotten a little bit older that not only does that make me more prone to injuries, I've learned that riding the energy and working with it is kind of like a life lesson for me too, learning how to ride a wave and to gain speed and to do things on it. So I like getting outside, yoga outside, surfing outside, energy. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say also in just a metaphorical sense.
Oh yeah.
Riding the wave.
Yeah. Riding the wave of energy. And
exactly.
And I think that would be a good transition point for, in my yogic practice, I don't just do the yoga positions and the exercise part and the meditation part, but I move energy around the body. And so there is a gentleman on Quora that had written me today, and he responded to a post that I put out there, and he said, "How do you ground?" And so, I thought I would do this podcast today for him. Yeah, of course. But because so many people have that question. So this would be probably the final spiritual point of grounding that I would make. And that is to learn how to direct the energy. And that's where we get the word pranayama from. This is an ancient practice that people have been practicing throughout all time. And learning to control the energy in your own body, in my mind, now that I've learned how to do it, I think it's just as important as eating or drinking. I mean, you wouldn't think to go 3 days without water because you would die of dehydration. You wouldn't think to go a long time without eating or breathing air. I really feel like energy, you know, the control or I don't like the word control, even though pranayama is defined as control of energy. I prefer the word direct because I feel like the word control in the United States in the West has a dark connotation, like, oh, he's so controlling. So I like to use the word direct because it's not that we are bossing the energy around as much as we are working with it and learning how to move the energy throughout our body, through the energetic body. We have the physical body, and within the physical body are 7 major chakras, energy vortices, wheels, or spirals, for lack of a better term. Those chakras feed the energy into different organs in our body, and to learn how to move the energy around the body, to me now, is one of the greatest gifts that I have as a human being, to realize that I'm not just a victim of life and circumstance, but that I can actually begin to master my own body and control myself and actually move the energy throughout my body. This has done wonders for me physically and mentally, I would say. Physically, in what way? I'm now able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. I can fast for longer periods of time. Why? My body runs more efficiently because the energy has helped me to slow down my heart rate. My body doesn't have to work as hard. It doesn't burn as many calories. I can go longer amounts of time. I used to get irritable if I was low on blood sugar. I'm not nearly like, I'm like 90% of that is gone, which has really changed my personality, because when you're low on blood sugar and you're low on energy, you're laughing. I know, Sarah, you get,
I laugh because I deal with the exact same thing.
do you get irritable when you get hungry?
Oh my goodness, I am freaking Hingerstein when I'm hungry.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I mean, well, it's not really that funny to people around us, but yeah, for me, like, I was clueless before. I didn't know, like, I mean, now there's certain things I would never do now. Like, I used to go out on an empty stomach and have like an old fashioned, or, you know, a certain kind of drink that like would give me a sugar spike. And then, you know, then I would get like low blood sugar, then I'd crash, and then I was buzzed on top of it. So I was like, hey, you know, or whatever. I don't even want to go there. But you get the idea. Now it's like, oh, it's totally different now. Like, you can actually, this may sound kind of funky. I know tell me what you think of this, Sarah, because I know it sounds kind of sensational, but I feel like you can eat the prana. Does that sound a little bit?
Yeah.
My cat just made a noise when I said that.
I want some prana.
I feel like you can, yeah, I feel like you can. Okay, case in point. So I started doing these prana, as she's talking about it. That's Macy the cat. Last time she actually moved my camera off center, was rubbing up against it. It was too far away for me to reach it, and she was like looking at me, rubbing her face on it. So that was a little bit of a nightmare. So hopefully I got it close this time. Hopefully she won't do that.
Precious.
Yeah, it's precious. And then until all of a sudden it shifted over to this other part of my room, like that wasn't so clean. But anyways.
Oh, gotcha.
No, but here, so back to the eating the prana, as the cat continues her spiel. So eating the prana, eating the air. Okay, so when I started doing some of these exercises, I learned that some of the yogis, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Sarah, but some of the yogis call the medulla the mouth of God.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever heard
of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In the beginning, it's like one of those ones I just followed. In the old days, I would have thought, well, that's ridiculous, and I would have just shut down like the old scientist who was an atheist, like, oh, that's baloney. But I just kind of put that away in the little file folder, and I'm like, okay, I'll figure that out later. And then one day when I was doing these yogic exercises, as I was inhaling, exhaling, I felt an enormous amount of energy flooding in through my medulla. And I was like, what the heck is that? And then I went back to that statement about how the medulla is the mouth of God. And then as I began to continue to advance in these yogic practices, I realized that I could pull an enormous amount of energy into my body through the medulla. And as a matter of fact, it was so radical that at one point I had to kind of back off because it'd give me, headaches and ringing ears and things like that. And that's when I knew that, okay, my body's, it's all,
You're awakening.
well, yeah, I was awakening, and it was
You're
almost like,
ascending.
yeah, I'm ascending, but it was also like, like pressured.
Too much.
Yeah, it's like overeating. I mean, you live off of food, but more is not always better, right? So, I mean, but anyway, so eating the prana, ingesting or inhaling, breathing the breath of life, that will ground you, that will stabilize you. That is, in my mind, along with pranayama, moving that energy, breathing the breath of life, that to me is a key spiritual practice that I just can't imagine life, without that.
It's a wonderful healing practice. You mentioned how you move the energy from sitting in these triggers and recognizing these triggers and understanding that you are not what happened to you, you are what you choose to become.
Right.
And you use it, this practice to move the energy and turn it into something positive, and then you eat the breath of life.
It's kind of like, as you were saying that, I love that. It kind of reminded me of Mr. Miyagi. And when he...
That's probably where I got it from.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Did you? I mean, just remember in the first Karate Kid when he was like Danielson, and he taught him, remember when he was teaching him to wax on and wax off? And so he's got him like, painting fences and waxing all his cars, 100 times over. And Daniel's feeling like, dude, this guy's like totally taking advantage of me. I don't, what the heck? He said he would train me karate, and all I'm doing is doing all this hard labor. And I feel like it's a similar situation, because in the Karate Kid, he finally found out that everything he was doing, that this master was teaching him, right? The master was teaching him to do these things. Then later on, the light bulb came on, and then he didn't even realize it, but he already had the skills to be a champion. He already had the skills. He already was a karate, practitioner, a karate master, but he didn't realize it because all he saw was the superficial things he was doing. And this is what I want to get across to anyone listening right now. If I talk about doing like yoga positions or doing breathing techniques or meditation, you might just think that I'm telling you to paint the fence. You're thinking, damn, I can't even meditate for 5 minutes. Why would I try and work up to 15 or 30 or 60 or 90 minutes? I can't. You don't understand. You're not just sitting still. You are ascending. You do these things, and then one day, like me, when someone says something, you all of a sudden, like when someone went to punch Daniel, what happened? He came up and he blocked that punch. Like when Mr. Miyagi said, oh, you just think you're doing, okay, watch. And then he started throwing punches at him, and then Daniel, the light went on. He realized, everything I've been doing all along is actually it. It's just I didn't realize it. And so... I like how you said, when I was breathing the prana, you said, you're ascending. And I didn't normally think of it like that, but that's what this is about, right? It's about ascending.
Yep. And you can't ascend unless you ground yourself and let go of the things that are no longer serving you.
I love that.
Because they're the ones that keep you down in 3D.
That's right.
In the Matrix.
In the Matrix. I love one of the things you said, Sarah, was you said something along the lines of, you said transforming that energy or letting go of, the things that don't serve you. Why? Because you're realizing that you're not that bad situation that happened to you, but that you said something like,
you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become.
Right. And wow, that like puts the fire under people's feet to actually stop blaming the way they are right now on their past, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a lot of healing in that, that is the main component of healing. So the first step is recognizing your triggers and sitting in it, right? So these meditation practices can help you control your reaction, first of all, but also recognize your triggers and figure out what it is you need to change, doing the shadow work and the things that you need to let go of. So doing the meditation work to let go of the things that are no longer serving you, and then using these practices to put you in a better state of mind, in a better state of physical health, so that you can, let things go and essentially, ascend by letting all these things go, and becoming a better version of yourself by letting all of these things go.
I love that. See, this is Sarah Lai. Sarah writes on Quora. I think if I remember right, I looked at your account and I think you have over 3 million content views. I think I said that to you the other day when we chatted, right? So
yeah,
you're getting up there, and I can see from that last statement you made that it just, I felt uplifted when you were talking about that. I felt like
Thank you.
like I notched up, and maybe we should just leave it at that, because that is, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, right? Looking at your past, realizing that it was just a situation, realizing that everything you are right now is not it's not so much what happened to you as much as the way you're perceiving your reality now. And what happened to you in the past, that's something that
shapes who you are.
It shapes, yeah.
It's not who you have to be.
And actually, in many ways, it might even make you better in the end, right? If it was something maybe not desirable or something that you think of as quote unquote bad. So we'll just say that it leaves you where we're at now. And where are we at now? We're in charge of our own reality. We've like Neo, we've escaped the Matrix. It's a little bit shocking at first, but we've escaped. And now we're looking back, realizing that's just a software world, Now we're ascending. Now we're in charge. Now we can go back into that world, and we can now, like Morpheus said, we can bend some of those rules. And in some cases, we can even break them, and we can ascend beyond what we thought was even possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And we'll be having you on the podcast again shortly. And I hope you have a great night out there.
Thank you. You too. Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah. Happy holidays.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Okay. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So that's the thing. That's the thing about the Matrix, is coming out of it so we can then see that we're living in this world of self-realization, realizing that all the things that we are really based on how we're perceiving ourselves. When I look at being grounded as a way of life, I look at it as a joy. Like every morning when I leave my house to head outside and jump in my little Fiat, I have a little electric Fiat 500e. I head out to do some yoga near the beach, and it really just becomes a joy. I hope that for those of you who listened because you wanted to pick up some pointers on grounding, I hope that you can find the joy in this whole thing. Because if it just looks like something that you need to do, something that, okay, I got to go out and get my feet in the sand. Oh boy, let me put my timer on, make sure I get 10 minutes. That's okay. But it would be nice if it could be mixed with an enjoyment and a sense of expectation and a sense of expecting to encounter divinity all around and within. So keep yourselves grounded. Keep yourselves in love. Put your mind on things that are far above earthly cares and worries and concerns. And you'll find in the end that all this talk that you see on YouTube, on the spiritual channels, you'll find that a lot of those terms and a lot of those things begin to make much, much more sense. And you'll find that, wow, I think I might be ascending. Because if you're in a practice where you're moving just a little bit day by day, you're just moving forward. Some days 3 steps forward, some days 2 steps back. But the point is you're moving. You'll find that you're ascending and that you're growing. And this life is full of unseen wonders. I'm just looking forward to exploring those with you on the podcast. Again, this is Streams of Light. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe or click like, and we'll see you again next time on Streams of Light. I'm Chris Anthony. Take care. Happy holidays.